Hello, everyone. Think about the last argument you had, or the last time someone said something that hurt you, frustrated you, or made you angry. What did you do? Did you respond immediately? Did you say everything you were feeling in that moment? Did you send the message, make the call, or speak the words before you had fully processed what you actually wanted to say? If the answer is yes, you are not alone. Research shows that the average person takes less than 3 seconds to respond in a conversation, and less than 2 seconds to react to a perceived emotional threat. Our brains are wired for speed in social situations. And that speed, in emotionally charged moments, is almost never our friend. Because here is what the most emotionally intelligent, most respected, most powerful communicators in the world understand that most people do not. Not everything deserves a response. Not every provocation deserves a reaction. Not every silence needs to be filled. And the ability to choose when to speak and when to stay silent is one of the most powerful skills a human being can develop. If you keep reacting to every emotional trigger you encounter, your relationships will stay difficult, your communication will stay reactive, and your English will always be shaped by anxiety rather than by intention. But if you understand the power of strategic silence, everything changes. Your conversations become more powerful. Your relationships become deeper. And your English becomes something genuinely impressive. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why emotionally strong people choose silence, what the neuroscience says about emotional reactions, and how to develop this rare and powerful ability in your own life and in your English. Stay with me until the end. Part 1. The neuroscience of emotional reaction. To understand why emotionally strong people stay silent, you first need to understand what happens in your brain during an emotional reaction. Because the process is faster and more automatic than most people realize. When you perceive an emotional threat, whether that is an insult, a criticism, a disagreement, or a provocative statement, the information travels first to your amygdala. The amygdala is your brain's threat detection center, and it processes emotional information approximately 200 milliseconds faster than your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for rational thinking and impulse control. This means that before you have had any conscious thought about the situation, your brain has already activated a stress response. Cortisol and adrenaline have been released. Your heart rate has increased. Your muscles have tensed. And a strong impulse to respond, either fight or flee, has already been generated. Research by neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux at New York University shows that this fast emotional pathway, what he calls the low road, evolved specifically for survival situations requiring immediate action. In the ancient world, hesitating in the face of a genuine threat could be fatal. Speed of reaction was literally a matter of survival. But in modern social situations, this same speed is almost always counterproductive. The situations that trigger the amygdala in daily life, a dismissive comment from a colleague, a critical message from a family member, a frustrating conversation in English, are not survival threats. They are social challenges. And social challenges require not the speed of the amygdala but the wisdom of the prefrontal cortex. The window between stimulus and response, that fraction of a second before your brain fires its first reactive impulse, is where emotional strength lives. And learning to expand that window is the most important emotional skill you can develop. Part 2. What strategic silence actually is. Let us be clear about what we mean by staying silent. Because this is not about suppressing your emotions, pretending nothing is wrong, or giving people the silent treatment as punishment. Those are not strength. They are avoidance. Strategic silence is something completely different. It is the deliberate pause between receiving an emotional stimulus and choosing your response. It is the space in which you shift from your amygdala, reacting from instinct, to your prefrontal cortex, responding from intelligence. It is the moment where you ask, what do I actually want to achieve in this situation? And what is the best way to achieve it? Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, wrote one of the most important sentences in the psychology of human freedom. Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space lies our freedom and our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our happiness. That space is what emotionally strong people have learned to expand. Not through suppression. Not through emotional numbness. But through the practice of pausing, breathing, and choosing rather than simply reacting. Research by Matthew Lieberman at UCLA shows that simply naming an emotion, recognizing and labeling what you are feeling, reduces amygdala activation by approximately 30%. The act of saying to yourself, "I am feeling angry right now," creates a cognitive distance from the emotion that makes responding rather than reacting significantly more possible. This is the foundation of emotional strength. Not the absence of feeling, but the ability to feel fully and respond wisely. Part 3. 5 situations where silence is stronger than speaking. Let me give you 5 specific situations where emotionally strong people choose silence. Not because they have nothing to say, but because silence is the most powerful thing they can say. The first is when someone is trying to provoke a reaction. Provocative people, whether consciously or not, are seeking your emotional engagement. They want to see your composure break. They want evidence that they have power over your emotional state. And every time you react, you give them that evidence. Silence, in this situation, is not passivity. It is refusal. It says, "Your provocation does not control me." The second is when you are angry. Research by Brad Bushman at Ohio State University found that expressing anger, venting, does not reduce it. It amplifies it. Acting on anger trains the brain to express anger more readily in the future. The old advice to express your feelings when angry is neurologically backwards. Silence, followed by reflection, reduces anger more effectively than expression. The third is when you do not have enough information. Many of the most damaging things ever said were said before the speaker fully understood the situation. Emotionally strong people wait until they have what they need to respond accurately and fairly. They are not silent because they have nothing to say. They are silent because they are still gathering what they need to say the right thing. The fourth is when words would escalate a conflict that silence would de-escalate. Research on conflict resolution consistently shows that the person who lowers their vocal tone, reduces the speed of their speech, and introduces pauses into a tense exchange creates space for the other person's emotional temperature to drop. In conflict, silence is often more powerful than any argument. And the fifth is when the other person needs to be heard, not responded to. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can offer another person is your full, undivided, non-reactive listening. The absence of your response creates space for their truth. And that space is often the most healing thing you can give. Part 4. Emotional strength and English communication. Now let us connect this directly to your English. Because the relationship between emotional regulation and language communication is profound and often overlooked. Most English learners experience their greatest communication failures not when their vocabulary is insufficient, but when their emotional state overwhelms their linguistic capacity. The moments when they know the words but cannot find them. When they understand the situation but cannot express their understanding. When the language they have worked so hard to build seems to disappear under the pressure of emotion. Research by Stephen Krashen shows that when language learners feel threatened, anxious, or emotionally activated, their affective filter, the psychological barrier to language production, rises dramatically. In this state, the brain redirects resources away from language processing and toward emotional management. Words that were accessible moments before become temporarily inaccessible. This is why emotionally strong English speakers sound so much more fluent than emotionally reactive ones, even at the same objective language level. The emotional regulation frees up cognitive resources for language production. The ability to pause, breathe, and respond deliberately rather than reactively gives the brain the fraction of a second it needs to access the right words. Every time you practice strategic silence in English, you are doing two things simultaneously. You are building your emotional regulation capacity, and you are giving your English brain the space it needs to produce its best work. The pause is not hesitation. The pause is mastery. Part 5. The Art of the Intentional Pause. Here is one of the most practically powerful communication skills you can develop in any language. The intentional pause. The deliberate half-second of stillness before you speak that changes everything about how your words land. Research on communication effectiveness consistently shows that speakers who pause before responding are perceived as more thoughtful, more intelligent, more confident, and more trustworthy than speakers who respond immediately. Not because the pause is long. Because it is intentional. It signals that what you are about to say has been considered rather than simply blurted. In English, the intentional pause is especially valuable because it gives you two things simultaneously. Time to choose your words, and a signal to your listener that your words are worth waiting for. The person who pauses before speaking in English sounds more confident than the person who rushes their words, even if the rushed speaker has better grammar. The practice is simple but requires consistent application. Before you respond to anything in English, take one breath. Not a theatrical breath. Just a natural, easy inhalation. Let it last 1 second, and then speak from that slightly more composed place. Over time, this 1 second pause becomes automatic. A natural part of how you communicate. Research by the HeartMath Institute shows that even a single deep breath activates the parasympathetic nervous system, reducing cortisol and increasing heart rate variability within seconds. The physiological effect of one breath is immediate and measurable, and the communication effect is equally immediate. One breath separates reaction from response, and response is always more powerful than reaction. Part 6. What you do not say defines you. Here is a perspective on communication that most people never consider. You are defined not just by what you say, but by what you choose not to say. The boundaries of your speech reveal the boundaries of your character, and the ability to choose your words carefully, to leave some thoughts unspoken, is one of the most revealing marks of emotional maturity. Research by James Pennebaker at the University of Texas analyzed the speech patterns of thousands of people and found that the specific words people choose, including what they leave out, are among the most accurate predictors of psychological health, relationship quality, and professional success available. How you speak, what you include and what you leave out, is a window into who you are. Emotionally strong people edit themselves not out of dishonesty but out of wisdom. They know that not every thought deserves to be spoken. Not every feeling requires expression. Not every provocation deserves engagement. They have developed the judgment to know the difference between what is worth saying and what is better left unsaid. This editing is not suppression. It is curation. The difference between a person who says everything they think and a person who says only what serves the situation is the difference between a fire hose and a precision tool. Both are powerful, but only one is useful in most situations. For English learners, this is particularly valuable. The awareness that you do not need to fill every silence, respond to every question immediately, or express every thought you have in English, removes an enormous amount of the pressure that makes English communication feel so stressful. You can take your time, choose your words, and speak less, but more powerfully. Part 7. Learning to listen at the level of silence. Here is the deepest practice associated with emotional strength in communication. Learning to listen not just to words, but to the silence between them. Because the most important communication often happens in what is not said. Great listeners, and research consistently shows that the ability to listen deeply is one of the rarest and most valued human qualities, do not just hear the words. They notice the pauses. The hesitations. The things the speaker starts to say and then pulls back. The emotions that color the words even when the words themselves seem neutral. Research by Albert Mehrabian at UCLA, often cited in communication studies, suggests that in emotionally charged communication, a significant portion of meaning is conveyed not through words but through vocal tone and nonverbal cues. What this means practically is that if you are only listening to the words, you are missing a substantial portion of what is being communicated. For English learners, deep listening serves a double purpose. It makes you a more empathetic, more connected communicator, and it exposes you to more of the language at a deeper level. When you listen to the rhythm, the pauses, the emotional coloring of English speech, you are absorbing patterns of the language that no grammar book can teach. Practice this in your next English conversation. Make a conscious decision to listen not just for information but for emotion. Notice what the other person seems to be feeling beneath their words. Notice where they pause. Notice what they almost say and then redirect. This practice deepens both your emotional intelligence and your English comprehension simultaneously. Part 8. Emotional strength is learned. Here is the most important thing I want you to understand about emotional strength. It is not a personality trait that some people are born with and others are not. It is a skill, a capacity that can be developed through specific practices, over time, by anyone willing to do the work. Research by James Gross at Stanford University, one of the world's leading researchers on emotion regulation, shows that the ability to regulate emotions effectively can be significantly improved through deliberate practice. Specifically, through cognitive reappraisal, the practice of consciously reinterpreting the meaning of an emotional situation, and through response modulation, the practice of choosing your behavioral response rather than simply enacting your first impulse. These are not complex psychological techniques. They are the simple, consistent practice of pausing, labeling your emotion, and choosing your response. Done repeatedly, over weeks and months, they build new neural pathways that make emotional regulation progressively more automatic and natural. For English learners, this means that every challenging English interaction, every moment of frustration, embarrassment, or anxiety in an English conversation, is not just an uncomfortable experience to get through. It is a training opportunity. A chance to practice the pause, to label the emotion, to choose your response from a slightly more composed place. Over time, these micro-practices accumulate into genuine emotional strength. The kind that makes difficult conversations easier. The kind that makes embarrassing English mistakes feel smaller. The kind that makes every English interaction feel less like a performance and more like a genuine human connection. Part 9. Silence as a form of intelligence. Let us talk about something that most people in the modern world have forgotten. Silence is not empty. Silence is full. Full of thought, observation, processing, and preparation. And treating silence as something to be filled, as something uncomfortable and unproductive, is one of the most costly mistakes a communicator can make. Research from the fields of creativity and problem-solving consistently shows that the best ideas, the most insightful observations, the most elegant solutions, emerge not during periods of intense activity but during periods of relative quiet. The brain needs white space to do its most important processing. Silence is not the absence of thinking. It is often where the best thinking happens. In conversation, silence serves a similar function. When you are silent, you are not absent. You are listening more deeply, processing more completely, preparing to speak more thoughtfully. The speaker who uses silence well sounds more intelligent, not because they know more, but because they have given their knowledge time to organize itself before speaking. In English, silence carries specific communicative meanings that many learners are not fully aware of. A pause before a difficult question communicates respect. A silence after someone shares something emotional communicates that you are genuinely taking it in. A quiet moment before you give important information communicates that what you are about to say deserves attention. Learning the communicative use of silence in English is learning a sophisticated dimension of the language that most textbooks never address. But it is a dimension that native speakers use constantly and that makes a profound difference to how your English is perceived. Part 10. The person you are becoming. Here is what emotionally strong communication builds over time. Not just better conversations. A better version of yourself. A person whose words carry weight because they are chosen carefully. Whose silence commands attention because it is never accidental. Whose English, however imperfect, is spoken with the dignity of someone who knows that what they say matters. Research by Angela Duckworth at the University of Pennsylvania shows that self-regulation, the ability to control impulses and choose deliberate responses over reactive ones, is one of the strongest predictors of long-term success across virtually every domain of life. More predictive than IQ. More predictive than talent. More predictive than external circumstances. Every time you choose the intentional pause over the immediate reaction, you are building this capacity. Every time you stay with an uncomfortable emotion long enough to choose your response rather than simply enacting your first impulse, you are strengthening the neural pathways of self-regulation. You are becoming more emotionally intelligent with each practice. And your English reflects this. The English speaker who has developed emotional regulation speaks with a quality that goes beyond vocabulary and grammar. They speak with presence. With intention. With the quiet authority of someone who knows that their words have been chosen, not simply produced. This is the English you are building. One intentional pause at a time. One chosen response at a time. One brave, deliberate, unapologetic sentence at a time. Final message. The world rewards loudness. It celebrates reaction. It fills every silence with noise and treats emotional expressiveness as a virtue and restraint as coldness. But the people who achieve the deepest connections, who communicate most powerfully, who are trusted most completely, are rarely the loudest in the room. They are the ones who have learned to sit with discomfort long enough to choose their response. Who have developed the wisdom to know when speech serves and when silence serves better. Who bring their full presence to every conversation rather than their first impulse. You are building this capacity right now. Every moment you choose to pause before reacting. Every time you take one breath before speaking English. Every time you listen more deeply than you speak. You are becoming emotionally stronger. More intelligently communicative. More genuinely powerful. And your English, growing alongside this emotional strength, will reflect it. Your words will carry more weight. Your silences will speak more clearly. And the people you speak to will feel, perhaps without understanding exactly why, that they are in the presence of someone worth listening to. You are not behind in this development. You are exactly where you need to be. And every practice, every pause, every moment of deliberate choice rather than automatic reaction, is moving you powerfully forward. Now I want to hear from you. Write one English sentence in the comments. Tell me this. What is one situation in your life where you are going to choose silence over reaction from now on? One honest sentence. Simple English. Your real commitment. I read every comment carefully. If this video helped you, subscribe to Gentle Wisdom. And remember, the most powerful thing you can sometimes say is nothing at all. See you in the next video.